Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava, Batra, Vav. Let's start with a quick review of what we were up to, which will help set the tone for what we'll be learning today. So I want to go back to the Mishnah on Daf Hey. On Daf Hey, we had a Mishnah about a wall that we had jointly built that fell down. And now we want to rebuild it. The minimum requirement is 4 cubits. It doesn't matter, right? 4 cubits, again, is our measurement for what will block one from looking into the other's courtyard. Our minimum, even if we'd originally built an 8-cubit wall, it doesn't matter. All we have to build right now is 4. If you decide you want to build it higher the way it was, I can say, I don't want to pay for it, and you'll have to pay for that other part yourself. And we said, we can assume about the first 4 cubits that I must have paid already, if we have some argument later. But if you decide you're going to build it up to 8, and I say, I'm not interested, but then I show that I'm interested by building a parallel wall in my courtyard at that height. Let's assume right now, although we'll talk about different heights later. Let's assume I build an 8-cubit wall opposite that one, and probably I plan to cover, that seems to be the intent, then, and basically make a wall from the joint wall that you built higher that I said I don't really want, to my new wall, then it's obvious that I do want that height of the wall, in which case we can obligate me to pay. And until I can prove I paid, we assume I haven't paid. So we already had a big discussion about what we did in the Gemara was we got sidetracked. We went to Rish Lakish and Abai and Rabbi who have a debate about a loan and believability when it comes to, did I pay back a loan or not? And it all came down to, right, once the date has passed and I claim that I paid on the date I was supposed to, since we're talking about a loan that was an oral agreement, I'm always believed. In fact, Rashi today quotes a sugya that basically says, it's in Shvuot, Daf Mem Aleph, if I took out a loan with witnesses, meaning we didn't write anything down, then when I pay back, I don't need to bring witnesses to prove that, to testify that I paid the loan back. Basically, I'm believed. When I claim later that I paid you back, I'm believed. And if you want to get the money out of me, well, you're going to have to prove it. But there's this assumption, and there's the debate between Rish Lakish and Abai and Rava, do people pay loans back before the date or not? And therefore, is someone believed when they claim, right? Let's say, now, the machloka between them is, let's say, okay, we gave an example, I don't remember, let's say, I think it was August 1st, and then on July 15th, we have an argument about the loan. You say, pay me. And I say, what do you mean? I paid you already. And then Rish Lakish will say, what do you mean? Nobody pays their loans early. I'm not believed because the date hasn't even come up yet of August 1st. Now the question becomes, what if it's August 15th? And now I could make a claim I paid you on August 1st, which then I'd be believed according to Rish Lakish. But because right now we're putting Abai and Rav aside because we don't hold by them. They think I'm believed even if I said, on July 15th that I paid on July 1st, they think it's fine, even though the loan hasn't come up yet, it doesn't matter. People often get the money and they pay and they think that's fine. But now we're within Rish Lakish. And the big question is like this. On the one hand, we have a chazaka that people don't pay their loans before the date. On the other hand, we have what's called a mali l'shakir, which is if we're on August 15th and the loan was due on August 1st, and I claim on August 15th, that I paid it already on July 15th. Now, normally, Rish Lakish would say no one's believed to say that because there's a chazaka that they don't do that. But in this case, we're not in July. We're in August after the loan was already due. And if I wanted to lie, I would have a much better lie. My lie would just be I paid it on time, which is August 1st. So the fact that I actually said July 15th, which is a less good lie, because it's less likely that I actually did that, it's less believable, maybe I'll be more believed because Mali l'shakir. If I was going to lie, I should have chosen a better lie. So usually we accept that kind of claim. But in this case, we have a chazaka going against me because it's not just it's a better claim to say August 1st than July 15th. It's not just that July 15th is a weaker claim. It's that we have a chazaka that I wouldn't have paid on July 15th. So we have two things pulling. Which one wins? That was our question. Do we say you can still have a mali l'shakir or not when it stands up against a chazaka? So let's start with our attempts to answer this question. We're going to have 3 attempts to answer the question. I'm going to give you the whole structure right now. First two are the two lines from our Mishna that we dealt with yesterday and then rejected them. And we're going to do the same thing now, thinking that they're like a regular loan, but in the end saying, no, this is a unique case. This isn't like a loan. Okay, because again, it's not a loan. It's just one person, right? Both need to be part of the expenses here of the wall. And then we're going to bring a third source. Okay, and we're not going to be able to come to a conclusion from anything. None of these sources are going to work. And if you want to get structure, the first one, we're going to try to say it does work. We do accept a mali l'shaker. And in the second two attempts, we're going to try to say we don't accept a mali l'shaker. But again, nothing is going to be accepted. So Tashma, let's start second line in our daf. Okay, so again, what does this mean? We're going to believe me that I paid for those 4 cubits of the wall unless you can prove that I didn't. Hechidami, what's the case? If we're talking about the wall was already built, it's past the time, and I claim I paid you when it was time to do it at the end, well, pshita, it's obvious that I'm going to be believed. In other words, you don't need this to tell me that. It's quite obvious. So you don't need a Mishna to tell me something totally obvious. So therefore, it must be exactly our case. What happened? We were standing after the time. It was already built. You claim you never paid me. And I said, what do you mean? I paid you way back in the beginning before I even had to pay you. Well, what do you see there? And I'm believed. So Alma, afilu b'mkom chazaka, rina mali l'shaker. There you have it. You should be able to make this claim. To which the Gemara says, no, there is no such thing in this case as before the time I was supposed to pay. This isn't like a loan where there was a due date. Because shane hacha, same thing we said yesterday, the kol safa v'safa zimnehu. Every row we build, since this is a joint venture, and every row we build, basically, and you could say neighbors don't really trust each other and don't want to end up in this fight with each other trying to get money back. They're not going to continue building until both people put in the money. So basically, it's always bisman. There is no such thing as before the time you're supposed to pay. So therefore, and that's what it's telling you basically, that if you claimed later, I'm still believed, even if it was betochzman, because there is no such thing as betochzman. And therefore, this has nothing to do with our case, because it's not a case where I'm making a claim that it was before the time, but I'm standing after the time. So that didn't work. Second source, Tashma. Last part of our Mishnah. Blah, 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 blah. And this was what I reviewed, right? Above 4, I don't have to pay. But if I built a wall opposite it, and then it shows I do want to, then I have to pay. And even later, it seems, I'm not believed ever, though, to say I paid unless I prove. The burden of proof is on me to prove that I shared in the payment. So now, Hechidami, what's the case? But I didn't read these words, but ad shevi raya natan, right? There was the ... until the words, the burden of proof is on me to prove that I actually paid. So hechidami, what's the case? If it's that you claimed later after we were done building the wall and I already had to pay, and I said to you, paratich bismani, and I said, look, I paid you when we finished building it, and I was supposed to. Well, am I low? I should obviously be believed in that case. So it can't be that case. If it's not that case, then what else is left? Exactly the case we're looking for. Elalav da'amar, and as we're standing later, the wall is built, and I claim pratif betochs money, and I said, oh, I paid for it while I was in the process of building my own wall. Then I realized, at that point I said, oh, well, I'm obviously going to use your wall. Let me now pay you. And I paid you before I really needed to. Alma, what do you see here? And I'm still not believed. So if I'm not believed, what does that mean? It's because I don't have a mali l'shakir. I could have had a better lie and said that I would pay, that I paid at the time I was finished, because there's a chazaka that says, right, this doesn't work because the mali l'shakir argument won't work, and saying, well, I said I paid before I was supposed to. I could have, if I really wanted to lie, I could have lied and said I paid on time. And therefore, right, the fact that we don't believe me, even though I could have had a better lie, well, then we don't say amali l'shaker b'mkom chazaka, b'mkom chazaka lo amrina amali l'shaker. But just like we rejected this understanding yesterday, we're going to reject it today. Shane hacha de'amal miyemer de'machayve li Rabbanan. We're going to go back to option 1. What did we say about option 1? If it's past the date, the wall is built, and I say, I paid you when the wall was completed. Now we thought, why wouldn't I be believed? I paid after the date it was due. I should be believed. But no, I'm not believed. Why? Because in this case, I could claim that, or you could say about me, that I thought, oh, I might never need to pay, unless the rabbi's right. Because what happened here? Originally, I didn't have to pay for those extra 4 cubits. So until the rabbis come and demand of me, now you have to pay for those 4 cubits, I'm not really convinced that they're going to do it. So therefore, I don't necessarily pay on time because I don't see it as this is my due date. So there is no real due date here. And therefore, we go back to option 1, and it's not option 2, which led us to say Mali l'shakir isn't believed, perhaps, right? Because there is no real date here, and therefore, that's why I'm not believed in that case. Okay, third source. Amalei Rav Acha bered Rav ale Rav Ashi. Tashma. So Rav Acha, son of Rav, says to Rav Ashi, we can learn it from here. Mana li biyadcha. So now we're in a different case, and this is a case from Shvuot. Mana li biyadcha va'amar lohem. You go to me and you say, Michelle, you owe me money. You took out a loan and you haven't paid me back. And I say, yes, you're right. I owe you money. Now, this was Sunday. Monday, now, I didn't pay you that moment. Monday, you come to me and you say, L'machar amar lo tanehu li. Say, okay, give me the money back. Now, between Sunday and Monday, some time passed. And I claim, Im amar nitzativ lecha patur. And I say, oh, I paid you already. When? Between Sunday and Monday. Yesterday, I said I owed you money. Well, then I went and I paid it. Okay? And this is where Rashi quotes it, that basically, if you loan me money with witnesses, I don't have to pay it back with witnesses. So I don't have to produce witnesses that I paid you back between yesterday and today. I can claim that and I'm good to go. I don't have to pay you. But, and this is going to be the big question, what's the difference between these two cases? If I said, Ein lecha biyadi, if I worded it this way and I said, I don't have any money of yours in my possession, chayav, I have to pay. Now this is weird. I don't have any money of yours in my possession. If I said that, it's kind of the same as saying I paid you back, right? What's the difference? Why am I not believed if I claim that? So the Gemara has to come up with what's the difference, and they're going to suggest that perhaps it's the difference between the two cases we're discussing. Did I claim I paid you before I was supposed to, or did I claim I paid you when I was supposed to? And perhaps that's the difference. So let's see. My lav nitativ lecha da'amar le peraticha bizmani. Nitativ lecha is when I said I paid you back when I was supposed to. Okay, let's say it's a little hard to understand the reality here because we're talking about a difference of a day. But first of all, lemachar might not actually mean literally tomorrow. Lemachar just means at some later point. So at some point between yesterday and today, let's just say it like this. We're talking about Sunday and Monday. So let's say I was supposed to pay you at sunset of Sunday. And let's say the encounter between us happened at 9 in the morning. So if I come the next day and say, listen, I paid it back to you at sunset on Sunday when it was due, then I'll be believed because that, again, works fine, right? I can generally be believed that I paid a loan when it was the time for it to be paid. But so that's Ein lecha biyadi is da'amar peraticha b'toch zmani. But ein lecha biyadi, sorry, I said that wrong. Nitativ lecha is da'amar peraticha b'zmani. But ein lecha biyadi, the second case where I'm not believed, must be the case of what? What else is left? When I claimed, oh, I paid you at 10 o'clock yesterday morning before I really needed to pay you. Right? It works better if you say there's a few days in between and it was a different day. But let's just go with lemachar, even though, again, lemachar doesn't necessarily mean literally tomorrow. Ein lecha biyadi, so I said, oh, I paid you, right? We're now talking, we're standing Monday. The date was due Sunday at sunset. I claimed I paid you Sunday morning right after we had that conversation. And the katane chayav. And what does it say? I have to pay you. I'm not believed. Why am I not believed? If I could have said a better lie, right? I could have said I paid you Sunday at sunset. But instead I chose to say I paid you Sunday in the morning. Shouldn't I be believed? Because why would I, if I'm lying, I may as well pick a better lie. So it must be chazaka lo amrina mali l'shakir. Because again, my mali l'shakir is standing against the chazaka. So this looks like I'm not going to be believed in a mali l'shakir when there's a chazaka standing against me that, of course, I don't pay loans before their time. To which the Gemara rejects and says, no, you missed the difference between the two cases. Okay, the difference between the two cases is not what day or time of day I claimed I paid the money? Was it before the time, at the time? That's not the issue here. What is ein lecha biyadi? Lo hayu dvarim me'olam. What happened? On Sunday, you came to me with witnesses and you said, Michelle, you owe me money. And I said, yes, I do. Now, at that point, I admit we had a loan. When you come tomorrow and say, pay up, and I say, already paid you back, some believed, because I can theoretically have paid you back between Sunday and Monday. But if I say, again, what were the words? Ein lecha biyadi, you have no money in my possession. Now, before we said you have no money, it could mean I paid you back. They're saying, no. Why do you word it as why did I word it as I have no money of yours? What I meant to say is, I never had any money of yours. Lo hayu dvarim me'olam, they like to call it lahadam, lo hayu dvarim me'olam, lahadam. I say, that never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. There never was a loan. Now, why am I not believed? Because yesterday in front of witnesses, I said there was a loan. So I can't come today and contradict what I said yesterday in front of witnesses. That's why I'm not believed. When I say I never took a loan, what I'm really saying is I'm trying to deny that there was a loan because I don't want to pay. And I'm basically admitting to the fact that I never paid back the loan. So that's why I have to pay. And that's the difference between them. It has nothing to do with our case. So we took 3 sources. Again, 2 were from our Mishna, not 2 different sources, but 2 different lines from our Mishna and this other Mishna in Shavuot. In the end, nothing had anything to do with our topic, and we're left without an answer. Now we're going to get back to this case where I build a kotel. First of all, there's good pictures in the Koran, although they don't fully help to understand. What we're going to struggle with in this section is the reality. Well, I would say it's both a struggle and it's kind of interesting because we get to learn about the reality of their times and different things that they used to do. It's just interesting. I mean, it's not the most fascinating topics of how they built their walls and things like that, but it is kind of interesting to see. And it also is challenging because they're using all sorts of words that we aren't familiar with from other places. And therefore, the commentaries all have lots of different interpretations, what exactly we mean by these terms. And also because perhaps each one used their own reality of where they were living to kind of try to understand the sugya, which might not necessarily match what the Amoraim were discussing because they were living in a different time in a different place. So anyway, it's a little challenging in the sense of trying to understand the reality of all the cases they're going to talk about. On the other hand, it's very interesting to learn about neighborly relations, and a lot of the issues are very relevant nowadays. So let's start with this kotel issue. So we built this joint courtyard wall. You built it higher than I wanted to spend. I said I'm not spending the money on it, but then I built my own wall in my courtyard. What if, now what we didn't discuss is, if we're assuming I built a wall the same height as the wall in the courtyard, and then the assumption is I'm going to put a roof on, and the same length, because then, right, it's opposite your wall, and I'm going to use the whole space of the wall, then I have to pay for the whole thing. What if, okay, let's just take a wall that's 8 cubits high and 10 cubits long. What if I built a wall that's only 5 cubits long, and then I'm only going to use, part of the wall to build my little enclosed area? Or I built it 6 amot high instead of 8. So I'm only going to use 2 extra cubits of the space that you spend and not all 4 of them. Remember the 4 from 4 to 8. So do I have to pay for the entire wall or only the part that I'm actually benefiting from? So of course there's a machloket. Amar Rav Huna, samach lepalga, samach lekula. If I use part of it, either height or length, well, I have to pay the entire thing. Okay, I'm using the wall. Rav Nachman amar lamai de samach samach, lamai de lo samach, just the part opposite where I'm using. So if it's less height or it's less length, I don't have to pay for the whole wall. Again, sharing the cost of the whole wall. Umode Rav Huna, but now we're going to have 2 cases where each admits to the other, and here we start to get complicated. What exactly does this mean? Mode Rav Huna bekarna velufta. Okay, Rashi explains karna velufta as one thing. Tosfot explains them as 2 different things. I'm going to actually go with Tosfot here because he has a very good explanation of what all these things are. So Mefarish Rabbeinu Tama Mimode Rav Huna bekarna velufta in Tosfot. Karna is leheker shelo ye'arecha choma yotel. Shebesof oto kotel samach shesamach haife lekarna kape kotlo shel chaviro. I built a wall that was only 5 in length, opposite your wall that's 10 in length. And I put a little edge at the side. At the end of the 5, okay, instead of going right, my wall was parallel, I went perpendicular. A little bit. Okay, that's like a karna is a corner. I made a corner in the wall. What does that indicate? That now we're going to understand Rav Huna. Rav Huna thought that if I built 5, I might just extend my wall to 10. So I have to partake in the whole thing. But if I built a little extra thing that shows I'm not going anywhere past here, this is where my wall ends, then I only have to share in half the cost. And what's lufta? Well, this is in height. Okay, again, this is Tosfot, not Rabbanit. Not everyone agrees with these commentaries. So if you're looking in some translation somewhere, you might see something different. Lufta is kel kotel yoter, and here it's just in height. So I built it 6 amot high, and then I put a little, right? I extended it outward a little bit to show that I'm not going any higher than that. So again, that would be an indicator. And Rav Nachman, who said I only pay for part, agrees with Rav Huna, I have to pay for the whole thing. Ba'afriza ubekavata de kashule. What are these things? First of all, kashure is a word we know, that's a beam. Okay, but the other words are much less familiar. Afriza. So again, let's go with Tosfot. Tosfot says, what's afriza? This is an indicator that you're the opposite, that you're planning to extend the wall. For example, he says, you have even echad bolat, even shokat. You have, it went 5 cubits, but you have a few stones sticking out farther, and it shows that you're planning to fill in the rest of the wall and continue going. And the akvata keshua is, and there's pictures in the Koran if you have it. Again, it's a little hard to understand, but you put in a space to put beams. So you're indicating, and here it's a little tricky because certainly the picture in the Koran gets you, let's say my wall is shorter, but I put in these nicks, like kind of made a hole in the wall to be able to put a beam in there. And then I want to have these beams going across. So again, it's a little unclear, but it seems like it's an indicator I'm going to go higher, because what am I doing here? When I put the beams, it means I want to put a ceiling here, and then I'm going to build upward and build a second floor. So that's what it seems to indicate. So again, it's some sort of indicator that I plan to keep going up higher. And then I have to pay for the whole thing, even according to Rav Nachman. I'm a Rav Huna. Now we're talking about something similar, but we're talking about a different issue. If you built the wall, now remember, I'm the one who says I don't want any higher. When you built the part above 4 amot high, the 4 cubit, you built to 8 cubits, you built nicks in the wall like we talked about before for beams to go into on my side of the wall. And now, I can claim later, or I can try to claim later, I already paid. And look, how do you know I paid? Because you built nicks for me to put my beams in, right? Then what happened? I put up my wall. I used the nicks that you put in the wall for my beams to make my roof here. Now, I can't claim, this is what it means. Beikave, if you made those windows, like openings in the wall, they call windows openings, but yeah, sockets, thank you. There were sockets in the wall. It's not a chazaka. What kind of chazaka here? That I paid already. In other words, the fact that you built it with the intent that I was going to use it is not an indicator that I paid from the beginning. Why? And even if you didn't just make the sockets, but there were, in other words, you made like a hole and then you turned it into a socket that really could fit a beam. Even so, da'amarle, you could say to me, Amina li lolitra ashitai. Why did you build them if you didn't know I was necessarily going to build a wall opposite and use it? At the beginning, I claimed I wasn't. I didn't want the wall. But what did you say? You said, I know, Michelle, she's probably going to want to build a wall. And if she comes to me later and says, I plan to build this wall, and then we're going to have to make the sockets in the wall, it's going to weaken the wall. We're going to, to make a socket, you have to kind of break the wall and then rebuild it. You don't want to do that. You want to build it right from the start. So you built it that way, even though I'm going to benefit, right? But in the end, it really benefited you. And you did it for your own sake so that you don't destroy the wall later. But it's not an indicator that I was part of it from the beginning and agreed and paid and all that. So I can't come and say, oh, I already paid you. Look, here's the proof. It's built for me. Don't you see? No, I can't claim that because it could be you did it for your own sake. I'm Rav Nachman. Now we're talking about something else. And this is also something I think that you can imagine someone might do. You might do to your neighbor might do to you. You have like a wall that's partly their wall or maybe fully their wall, but it's on, in your courtyard. And you put a beam on top because you want to now use it to build something on your side, right? Whether it's this roof that you're going to build from, or something like that. So you put some beams on their wall because you're going to use it to support the beams that you want to build. and they don't complain. If they don't complain, then it seems like they're okay with it. So the question is, can you put more? Can you put a different type of beam? Can you put a heavier type of beam? Because again, the more you build, we talked about this with the bayit and the aliyah, the more you build, the weaker it's going to make their wall. So Rav Nachman says, achzik lehorde lo achzik lekashule. If you put very thin beams up and they didn't complain, it means they don't care and they're fine with it. But it doesn't mean you could put heavier beams. And then if they complain, you say, what do you mean? You were okay with the thin ones. Obviously, you showed you don't care. You show you don't care with heavy beams. No, they could say, I don't want heavy beams on my wall. It's going to wear down my wall. But achzik lehorde, but achzik lekashule, lekashure achzik lehorde. But if you put heavy beams and they didn't complain, then you could put lighter beams and claim. And then if they start arguing, you say, what do you mean? You already didn't care about the heavy ones. Obviously, you don't care about the light ones. And they have no claim against you. Rabbi Yosef Amal, he disagrees with Rav Nachman and says, achzik lehorde, achzik lekashurim. It's all one and the same. It doesn't matter if one's thicker, one's thinner. It's all the same. Once you do one and they don't complain, you can put more and more and more, and they won't be able to complain. You can say, what do you mean? You showed you didn't care. Obviously, I can continue to do this. Some people even say that Rav Nachman agreed with Rav Yosef. And the Amar Rav Nachman, so there were two versions of what he said, achzik lehorde, achzik lekashure, achzik lehorde, that it goes in both directions. Now we're going to do the same thing with your roof. Okay, we all know that roofs, the water streams off the roof, and if you don't have a gutter, it goes right onto the ground. Now, what if my roof dumps out on my neighbor's courtyard? So, again, Amar Rav Nachman, achzik lenatve, if already my water is streaming down my roof and I don't have a gutter and it goes right into my neighbor's courtyard and they don't complain, then obviously achzik l'shvache. Now, what's shvache? That's where I had a gutter, and the gutter dumps out all in my neighbor's yard. Now, that's obviously better for the neighbor because it only dumps out in one spot. If it dumps out right from my roof, it's going to dump out in a lot of spots. So it's worse to have it just dumping from my roof without a gutter. It's better with the gutter because it only goes in one place. And one could say, what do you mean? It dumps more water in one spot. It's much more damaging, right? If you ever see where the water comes out of the gutter, it can bear a hole in the ground there, but somehow that's not what they're thinking. So again, the direction of Rav Nachman is one and not the other. If you're, again, depending on which direction. If you're achzik lenatve, then achzik l'shvache, which is the gutter. But if you're achzik l'shvache, if you have a gutter dumping out and then your roof starts leaking out all over, lo achzik lenatve, you're not going to be allowed to do that if they complain. Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi Yosef, again, he seems to have this very lenient approach. Once you're achzik for one, you're achzik for the other, and basically you could do whatever you want. And again, like before, some people say that Amar Rav Nachman, achzik l'shvache, achzik lenatve, achzik l'shvache, that he says it goes both directions. But here he adds one more thing, and again, huge difference of opinion among the commentaries what this case is. If you have a hut made of a ravot, okay, like for Sukkot, we use a ravot, that kind of wall, okay, the best interpretation I saw was, okay, what's the difference? We're going to say that already the water, if the water leaks off a roof like that, it's much worse. Everyone is in agreement about that. Question is, why is it much worse? So I'll give you one interpretation that I thought was nechmad, but again, I don't know if it's convincing enough. But when you go past a tree after there's been a lot of rain, you might notice the tree continues to drip for a long time after, right? Because the water doesn't get absorbed in, so it just kind of keeps dripping off. So perhaps that's the problem with this wall, this roof, is that it's not just when it rains it drips, but it drips at all sorts of other times because the rain kind of gets stuck there and comes down. So the weakness is it's not any more water that's dripping, it's just dripping for a longer period of time, but maybe that's annoying also. So whatever reason, Rav Nachman thinks that there's more water here, it's more of a problem. Some people think it doesn't get absorbed into the roof shingles, and it just all comes off, whereas other roofs maybe absorb some of it, and maybe therefore, either which way, it's more water, and that's why even if you're shvache and natve, it's not necessarily going to be true for the orbane. Rabbi Yosef, again, l'shitato, says afilu tzrifa de orbane. Other Rabbi Yosef uvada b'tzrifa de orbane even had a case with it where he allowed it. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Bava. Now we're going to talk about another situation. Hamaskir bayit lechavero. You rented someone a house, turning out a bet, b'bira gdola. You have a big house. Rashi explains it very nicely. It's a very long house. It has a lot of different rooms in it. and you give one room. So what are you allowed to use in that house? What space is common space that's meant for you to use? So mishtamesh, right? Obviously you have space in the room, but what else beyond that? Mishtamesh bizizeha ubekotaleha ad arba amot. You might remember, I think particularly in Eruvin, we talked about these zizim, which jutted out from the house. It was like these beams that were in the wall. People would hang things on them and other stuff. If there's these things that are jutting out, people could put stuff on them. Or the walls. People used walls in those days. They stored things in the walls. Remember in Bava Metzia, if you find things from from the half, outside, inside, who does it belong to? So bizizeh ubekotala ad arba amot. So you have the walls and anything jutting out, these protrusions, not only right outside your room, but 4 cubits of space from the room that you're renting. Uba obi akotel bimkom shenagu, and you even get the depth of the wall. That all depends on what the custom is, right? All these things really going to be dependent on custom. Aval b'tarbetz apande lo. Okay, now I just want to point out, Rabbi Nachman is quoting Rabbi Baruch. Here in a minute, he's going to say, but I myself disagree, and I hold this. But tarbetz apande lo. What is tarbetz apande? So Rashi says, he basically describes like a little garden that the houses would have to go sit outside, almost like a patio. Okay, so there's grass there, and it's very pretty. So basically he says, well, that's for the owner of the house. You don't have permission to go there. Rav Nachman didei amar afilu b'tarbetz apandi. Rav Nachman says, no. Right? He quotes Rav Ravua saying this, but he thinks you can even use that garden. But what can't you use? The backyard. This is why I said it's an interesting sugya, because you learn a little bit about, right? We learned the chatzer, where they store a lot of things. That was their front yard. Their backyard apparently was a more private area, which only the residents of the house could use and not someone who's renting there, right? And this patio was maybe a space that people could use, shared, people renting there, maybe not. There were difference of opinion about it. So you're starting to learn about all the different areas they had outside their houses. So Rava Amal, he has a different opinion. He says even even the backyard you could use. And again, their difference of opinion could have been dependent on where they lived, right? And what was customary in their area. Amaravina, another issue. This, I actually have something like this in my house. We have a sukkah porch upstairs, and we have beams that we put in for sukkah 1 year for Sukkot, that we could put like permanent beams that, that we thought they were temporary, and they stayed there for many years. And they're leaning on a wall that's a shared wall with us and the neighbor. So that's exactly this. Hi, kishur de metaltala. If you put a beam up, okay, I'm not sure if ours is actually on our neighbor's wall or on ours, but let's say it was on the neighbor's wall, and you put this beam up in order to create a shady area, right? Like a pergola type thing. Ad taltin yomin lo havi chazaka. The first 30 days, the neighbor has to complain. If they complain within the first 30 days, you'll have to take it down. But batar taltin yomin, if they haven't complained after 30 days, this is a topic we're going to get to a lot when we get to Peskat Habati, 3rd chapter, about living in land for 3 years and the neighbor didn't complain, the person whose land you're in didn't complain, right? If you don't protest, well, then it's an indicator that you're okay with it. We don't need you to sign off on it, right? Like sometimes you have to sign off on a document with the neighbor, what you can do, what you can't. These things, you don't have to sign off on them. By not protesting, you're indicating you're okay with this. And then that becomes halacha. Then you can't later claim, oh, I don't want you to do this. So batar taltin yom, if 30 days pass without protest, habe chazaka. Those are there and they can't complain. But isukah de mitzvahi, but if you built it for the chag of Sukkot, ad shiva yomim, for the 7 days of Sukkot, lo have chazaka, you don't create a chazaka because they know you're going to take it down after 7 days. But batar shivin yomin is interesting because not everybody takes down their sukkah right away. But if after 7 days you didn't take down this beam that was leaning on your neighbor's courtyard and they didn't say anything, have a chazaka, it's immediately a chazaka on day number 8, basically. The ichadre betina, now if from the beginning you put it up in a very serious manner, like you didn't just stick a beam on and with something loose, but you nailed it down really hard, or you put it, you glued it very strongly, la altar have a chazaka. And if they didn't complain when they saw you doing something serious that looked like you were building it permanently, well, then it's immediately a chazaka. So here you get to different things about what the expectation of the neighbor is to protest, and how with each item, it's a different amount of time that you could create a chazaka. Now we're back to hezek re'iyah, blocking off someone's view from looking into your your territory. Now, we talked a lot about the chatzer. We talked about there's a difference between the chatzer and the gag. A roof people don't use so much. A chatzer people use a lot. So you need more privacy in the chatzer. But here we're talking about two people who live opposite each other. Okay, it's shnei tzidei reshut harabim, and they each have a roof, and the public domain is in between them. Ze oseh ma'akel lechatzi gago, v'ze oseh ma'akel lechatzi gago, ze shelo neged ze u'ma'adif. What does this mean? So let's say it's 10 cubits of space. You build yours on the left side, 5 cubits wide, and it's got to be 4 cubits high. That's you. You build on the left side. I build on the right side. Okay, in other words, because our houses are exactly opposite. I've covered the left side. You've covered the right side, or whatever, right? North side, south side. Okay, I cover my side. You cover your side halfway. We each have a ma'akeh over half of our space, and ma'adif, and we each go a little bit longer. So let's say it's 10 cubits. So you go 6, I go 6, or 5.5, 5.5. We have to have a little overlap space so that basically when you're looking from yours, part of it is blocked by you and part of it is blocked by me. You can't see into my roof and I can't see into yours. This reminded me of when I lived in the dorms in Barnard many years ago. We would open our window and right opposite, you would look into someone else's window, right? Like you couldn't help it, but you open your window and there's someone else's window. Now there was a Reshut Rabim in between, and the Gemara is going to say, why are we talking about Reshut Rabim? Even if there's not Reshut Rabim in between, we should have to be obligated for privacy's sake to put up a ma'akeh here, right? A ma'akeh is like a fence here. That's the way really they mean it. That would block. So now they say, my area Reshut Rabim, afilu Reshut Yechidani, even if there was a private domain in between or nothing in between. Reshut Rabim eats terichale. Well, they needed to tell you, even if there's a public domain in between your apartment and my apartment, or your house and my house, ma'u detema nema. You know, maybe you could say to me, you know what? I have to build half, you say to me, because to block off block off seeing into your apartment, Michelle. But why? If you really want privacy, it's not just for me you need privacy from everyone Reshut Rabim. So if you want privacy, put up the whole way on your side. In any case, all the people from the public domain can go looking into your house. And this comes to tell you, you don't have a claim like that. Why not? We're going to bring 3 interesting differences between the neighbor who's up top looking in from their roof to the people down at the bottom in the public domain who aren't necessarily looking in, right? The most people you need privacy from are the people opposite you and not the people down below. And it makes sense for 3 reasons. Kamash v'lanta amarle, I could say to you, now, I don't have to block from Reshut Rabim, but I do have to block from you, and it's your fault, so you have to pay for half of it, you know, and put half of it on your side. Because Rabim b'yamam chazule, b'leil yelo chazule. Nobody walks around Reshut Rabim at night. Now, nowadays, this is different. But in those days, nobody walked around at night in the public domain. People were all in their houses. So it was dark out. So at night, they don't see me. They only see me during the day. But you see me also at night. It's, by the way, also much easier to see in someone's house at night when there's a candle in there, right? It's harder during the day than to see inside. Alternatively, Rabim kikaim nachazuli. When I stand up, they see me. But kiativna lo chazuli. When I sit down on my roof, they can't see me. They don't have, right, the vision from down below. You can't see. Only when I stand up on my roof are they going to see me, right? Again, we're not talking about inside the house. We're talking about outside. But you can see me whether I sit or whether I stand, unless we put up this 4-cubit wall. Third difference, Rabim kima'ayinu chazuli, kiloma ayinu lo chazuli. People from down below, I'm only worried that they're going to actually look up and look into my roof. Now that's unlikely, right? They won't look at me unless they actually try to look at me. But you see me no matter what, even that's what I was saying, right? You'd open your window, you wouldn't even try to be looking at your neighbor, but you had no choice but to look at your neighbor because that's the first thing you see when you open your window. So you're going to see me when you go out on your roof, you're going to see me whether you like it or not. And that's why each side is obligated for half. Amar, now we're just going to go back to this line and ask something else. Right? Each one builds half in the part that's not opposite the other and adds a little extra in between. Pshita, isn't this obvious? Well, they say, well, if one starts, let's say you started building your ma'akeh first. Maybe you might have thought I could say to you, Shko uzinka. Uzinka is money. Take money from me. I'll give you. You're already starting to build. It's easier than me getting my own builder and starting to build. Why don't you just build yours across? I'll share in the cost and be done. And you do the whole thing. No, this is telling you, Kamash Malan de Amarle, at my time alo avad, you could say to me, why don't you want to do it, Michelle? It's not just that you're lazy and whatever, but what's the issue? You don't want to mishum de mitra shitach. It weakens your wall. So remember, we talked about the more you build, right, on a wall, the more it's going to weaken the wall. Ananami mitra leashita. So I don't want to build it on my whole thing, you tell me, because it's going to weaken my wall more. So just like you don't want to weaken your wall, I don't want to weaken my wall, and therefore I'm going to build on half, and you have to build on half. I'm Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, just like before, Rav Nachman quoted Rabbi Ravua, and then Rav Nachman had his own opinion, also here. Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel, Gag hasamuch lechatzer chavero, and this we quoted already on Daf Bet Amud Bet. If my roof is at the height of your courtyard, okay, I have this with my neighbor, okay, we happen to be, our street goes up a little, and because of that, their garden is higher up than mine, so it's really on the height of my roof. Oselo ma'akeh, except that these are right next to each other, okay? So they're touching. Oselo ma'akeh gavoa arba amot, ava ben gag legaglo. Between two roofs, you don't have to do a ma'akeh, because we assume that people aren't necessarily going to look from roof to roof. This is what Shmuel says, okay? It's different than we saw before, what Abaye said. But you do a ma'akeh gavoa arba amot, ava ben gag legaglo. So between a chatzer and a gag, you need to make this separation. Because the person in the chatzir could say, I don't know when you're coming out to my roof. Remember we had this? And therefore, I don't know when to do things privately or not. But between roof to roof, no, because it's unlikely people aren't out there so much at the same time. Rav Nachman didei amar, eino zakuk la'arba amot. You actually don't have to do 4 cubits high. Aval zakuk lemechitzat asara. But you do have to make a mechitza that's 10 tefachim high. So lemai, what's his 10 tefachim high mechitza? Whenever we talk about hezek re'iyah, I'm looking, we say it's 4 cubits. So why 10 tefachim, which is, right, 4 cubits is 24 tefachim. Why only 10? Ila hezek re'iyah, if it's because we're worried about blocking the vision, arba mop'ina. Ila nitpas alei keganav, if you're worried they're going to walk into your garden and kind of sneak in and maybe take something, b'masifas ba'al masagi, you could just put up a barrier. Okay, we said it's some sort of flimsy mechitza, perhaps just a bunch of pegs in the ground to kind of block them. If you're worried about animals from the chatzor going into your roof or vice versa, this is the shiur we've seen before with as long as you have 3 tefachim high, they're not going to be able to just wander in. So that's 3 tefachim. So how do we get to this 10 tefachim? It really is that you're worried about them just wandering into your property. Well, if it's very flimsy, they might just still wander in and say, oh, I was looking for a ball that came over, or, oh, I was just looking at the boundary, I got a little confused, oh, whatever. But if there's a real serious boundary there of a wall, they're not going to just accidentally, or claim it was an accident, I just kind of wandered into your territory. And that's what he needs it for. So now they say meitive, but now we have a problem. Because it says here, in a tannaitic source, if your chatzir was at the height of your friend's roof, then the person in the chatzir doesn't need to build a wall. There's a debate whether the roof person does or not, but for sure this at least means that the one in the courtyard doesn't need to, because again, we don't assume the person in the roof is out there very often. My lab enis kakin lokal. Now it sounds like you don't need to do it at all. Now what did we say before? If there's a gag samuch lechatzir chavero, Rav Chisda said, right? Rav Nachman said you have to build a separation, right? So that you don't wander in. You should worry about that. So what do they answer? No, you don't need a barrier to stop from looking, but you do need a barrier to protect from walking, and therefore we resolve the contradiction. Itmar, another machloket. Here's a different issue, okay? We just keep seeing today a lot of different issues that could come up between neighbors, all different kinds of issues. So one is higher than the other. The lower one puts up the wall on the lower part, and the upper one puts the wall on the upper part, because the lower one doesn't need the wall on the upper part, right? So each one pays for their part. The wall down below doesn't really help the upper person. The wall above helps the upper person. But Amar Rav Chisda Amar El Yom Milamato Bonet. The upper one has to help with the bottom one. Why? Because you can't have an upper wall without a bottom wall. The upper wall will stand in midair. So the bottom wall is actually servicing the person upstairs, on the higher level, because if they don't have a wall to build on, they won't be able to build their own wall. So they actually have to partake in half the hotzaot of the bottom one. Tanya Kavatei Rav Chisda, here's a brighter to support, and with that we'll finish for today. Right? Again, he doesn't say, I'm just going to build from my part up. He actually has to help build the lower part as well. And this is just a different point in the Braita, which goes back to the sugya we just said, which is if the courtyard of the upper person was the same height as the roof of the other neighbor, eino zakuklo. So again, the chatzer owner doesn't need to build a wall to block the view from the roof of the other person. Okay, that was today. So we started with this big question. Does Mali L'Shaker work when there's a chazaka working against the Mali L'Shaker? We, in the end, didn't have an answer, even though we've had 3 attempts. Then we started with all the issue of the wall, and if the wall is lower or longer, or lower or shorter, less long than the other, do they have to pay for the whole thing? And we saw these exceptions to the right with machloket, and then each one had exceptions to the rule. And then we had a whole debate about all these chazakas. If your neighbor didn't complain about this, do we assume that you can already do more than that, or less than that, or right? Which could you assume or not? Machloket Rav Nachman, Rav Yosef, and debate what Rav Nachman himself held. And then we got to the sukkah issue and the building, leaning it on the wall. We had the 2 houses and how they have to block the view from one to the other. And then we had the chatzer and the gag on different heights, or the chatzer and the gag on the same height, or 2 chatzerot at different heights, and what the laws were, right? Do we have 2? I'm confused, but anyway, we had the gag and the chatzer on the same height and what you have to do. And we had the 2 chatzerot at different heights, and about the wall that they're building, since the lower wall is providing the support for the upper wall, does the upper person have to partake in the cost of that as well or not? We saw machloket about that. With that, finishing for today, wishing everyone a good day.